Bom dia a todos. Good morning, everyone. I hope that people are arriving. Welcome to our webinar on how to successfully export free from products to the United Kingdom. This event is a partnership between HRA Foods and Drinks Consultant, ApexBrasil, and the trade section of the Embassy of Brazil here in London. My name is Thiago Ossi, and I am the head of trade and investment at the Embassy. Working under the leadership of our ambassador to the United Kingdom, Eduardo dos Santos, and of the Trade Promotion Department at our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, this trade section is focused on promoting Brazilian exports to the United Kingdom and on attracting investment to Brazil. One important part of our job is to provide information to Brazilian companies about the UK market. We have identified potential opportunities in the free-from sector, and we thought it would be useful to organize a webinar so that you can directly learn from and ask questions to a specialized consultant on how to export these types of products to the UK. This is the first webinar organized by us, and we are very grateful to our partners for their key support to the event, and to, of course, all the participants from Brazilian companies who are taking their time to attend this webinar. Just before we start, let me mention some housekeeping issues and notices. If you have a question, please go to the chat tab and do it in English, please. You can send your questions to everyone. And also, please, this is the golden rule. If you can mute your phone while you are watching, that's very helpful to avoid problems to the other listeners. And this webinar is being recorded. Thank you once again, and we hope this meeting proves fruitful for your business. I would like to give the floor now to our keynote speaker, Mr. Hamish Renton.
Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar. Thank you for that introduction. That's very helpful. I'm hoping you can now all see the main screen that we have up, and we can now start the main content of the webinar. I wanted to cover a couple of things really before we get going, just to say what's the experience that we have. And our company does three things, and this is why we feel we know a lot about this market and a lot about successfully exporting to the UK. Firstly is commercial and marketing. We look at marketing, branding, many mergers and acquisitions, business turnarounds. We do a lot of work on exporting, looking at what your plan is on market entry, which channel to select, which partner, agent, distributor, to work with. We look at competitors as well, and we also do market research as well, both quantitative and qualitative, because certainly in the British market, the chances of your success and even getting a meeting with the big retailers were much higher if you've done your market research and can show how your product and your brand would fit into the UK marketplace. And recently, in the last 18 months, we've helped over 30 companies from outside the UK successfully launch into the UK and get sales and listings. So we know what we're talking about, and we can take it from there. And please ask any questions as we go through, and we can take it all from there. So let's start, as I like to start, with the UK consumer. What are they like? Well, they're 2 years ahead of the European competitor in terms of trends, okay? They are more likely to eat on the go, eat out of home. They like strong tastes, spicy tastes. They like international cuisine. They like to try new things, which is always very useful when you're looking to export. And they like to try and cook from scratch as well. So they're used to cooking from scratch as well. So in that sense, they're an interesting target and a good place to start your European adventure, okay? That's the shopper. The most important thing, though, is they will pay a premium for new health trends. Fair trade, free from, vegan. If you can demonstrate some added value, they will be very interested indeed. Okay, looking at the British market as a whole, there are 3 key trends that we need to think about. The first is this trend towards health and better health. There is very much, you know, a sense that you are, you know, clean eating is very much the trend that people are working forward. Fitness, high protein, sugar reduction. These are some of the big things that are hitting the button. So if you have products in these areas, good news. The second trend is premium, free from, organic, health. Are your ingredients innovative? Are they exotic? Are you targeting the top line of the you know, the retailer? And then lastly, convenience, on the go, quick recipes, shorter cooking times. These things are also important. And then a question we're often asked is, what is free from? Is it wheat-free, lactose-free, dairy-free? Is allergen-free in this market as well? Is vegan, meat-free? Is that part of the market as well? And I think, you know, we're asked a lot about sugar-free. Does sugar-free be part of free from? You know, as I say, is vegan as well. So the market is very much developing in the UK. So the market, we think, I mean, Euromonitor's estimate is 970 million sterling. That's a bit higher than Mintel and some other data companies. Some of them include meat-free, some of them don't. Kantar says it's about 800 million. So I think if anywhere between, you know, 800 and a million and a billion. So it's a big, big market. And gluten-free is the biggest sector. And if you look here, you can see gluten-free 37%, meat-free 15%, dairy-free 25%. So that gives you a feel for what this market really is. Who's buying it? Well, if you look here, there's a variety of people. The 1 in 4 consumers are buying free from regularly, and most over-index on the females aged 25 to 34. Gluten-free is the majority of the category. 2/3 of them have no allergy or tolerance. And I love this quote from the American market. People in Los Angeles are deathly afraid of gluten. You could rob a liquor store with a bagel. And there's, you know, whilst that's not quite the case in the UK, I think you get a sense of where it is at the moment. So if you look at the market as a whole in terms of an overview, you know, actually it's 0.1% of all global packaged sales. And the gluten-free element is around half of the market, and the UK is around about 9 to 10% of all global free-from sales. So a good place to start. And if you look, it's, gluten-free is the largest component. And these are some of the brands that have come in: Nestle, Shah, Genius, and then kind of NutriBix as well. So there's been a lot of interest in this area. Lactose-free is an important point, and that's where someone is unable to digest the carbohydrate found in milk. And there's no regulation at the moment saying how little lactose a product must have to be lactose-free. And interestingly enough, 25% of Europeans do suffer from lactose intolerance. You can see there that the incidence of down in Brazil, you have a higher incidence than we do up here, but we still have quite a high incidence. So it's an interesting, important point as well. And if we look, you can see there that the amount of lactose in different products, whole milk has significantly more than, say, hard cheese here. Okay, so it varies as we go through. Vegetarian, if we look at that as an overview, that's something where a vegetarian, to state the obvious, avoids meat and meat-derived products, but would have cheese, would have dairy, would have honey, whereas a vegan would avoid everything, including leather goods, honeys, etc. Okay, there are 600,000 vegans and 3 million vegetarians in the UK, really driven by these sort of 4 trends here. You have the core vegans, you have vegetarians. These guys eat fish, and these are meat reducers. So there's been sort of meat-free Mondays, these sorts of things. And that's very much opened up the market as well. So a big market in anybody's book at that stage. And if we look at dairy-free, and that's an important part of the market, then you'll find that it's about 250 million. Okay, and most of it is milk alternatives, sort of here. This is a big area, 85%. Little bit of soy, but going out of fashion. So mainly it's around the milk alternatives that people find. Obviously, dairy-free sees vegan and lactose-free overlap. Traditionally, these products were made from soya, but more common, alternatives are coconut, nuts, grains, even hemp as well. So it's an interesting one. Sugar-free is very big, and is something that the government have actively sought to reduce over here in the UK, people's consumption of sugar. And there was a big report, a while back on sugar reduction, the evidence for action. And there's all sorts of things. You don't need me to tell you that sugar has a bad reputation for all sorts of things. And we're just starting a sugar tax over here that's starting to come into to action. So again, if you can reduce the sugar, and I know in Brazil particularly you have a lot of stevia on the go, but there's sorbitol, there's xylitol, there's sucralose, there's saccharin. You have these other sweeteners as well. And it has a bad reputation in that sense. So if you can reduce the sugar, so much the better. Ambient goods, so products that aren't chilled or frozen in free from, as you'd imagine, cakes and breads make up most of it, and it's the largest category really. But bakery is by far the biggest sectors, and actually, the cakes that exist, they are very much going down at the moment due to trends because they are a bit sugary, and people are wanting more kind of healthy options in that sense. So it's moving more towards these bars than the other types of goods. If we look at the cereals market in freeform, which is an interesting market, if we take the total market being some, around about $1 billion, I think that's a good place to start. Cereals that are gluten-free is 6.5–7% of that, and you can see it's quite a big market. You've got Nature's Path here, you've got Nestle here, you've got the supermarket, so here's Tesco, and you've got the market, here's Asda as well. lot of people interested in that market. So again, that's one where I think if you have an interesting cereal, that could be a very interesting conversation to be had. Snacking, and that's a sort of different area. And 69% of customers are interested in seeing more items. And this very much is, snacks are where it's at. People are busy, they're working longer hours, they don't have time to cook, so they're looking to snack. And therefore this convenience channel, so these are more 7-Eleven type stores, and convenience products are both going to be in good growth going forward. One of the key trends is FODMAPs, which is an acronym. It's quite a long word, and you may not have heard of this. It's coming out of Australia. So the F is for fermentable, oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. So FODMAP, okay? And effectively, what FODMAP says is it isn't the gluten in the diet that's making you ill. It's one of these 6 sugars. So it might be, for instance, actually it could all be the polyols. There's a lot of polyols in, say, apples. It could be the disaccharides. And what you therefore have to do is go through an exclusion diet until you can basically see where all of these are and what could be done there as well. So I think that's an interesting area, very much. So you have these areas, the galactose, sort of the monos, the dis, and the polyols. And what they do basically is they line the large intestine. And what people have to do is a 6 to 8 week exclusion diet, and whereby you have none of these products, and then you broadly reintroduce them one at a time. So you'll bring in the polyols. Everything okay? Great. Now I'm going to bring in disaccharides. Is everything okay? Great. Now I'll bring in monosaccharides. And you'll find out which of those sugars, which of those 6, is able to gives you the problems. And that means, actually, as you can see here, is, have we got it all wrong about gluten? Is this an issue? Don't assume that you're gluten intolerant. It could be garlic, it could be onions, okay? So that's an important trend. And if you've got anything, products in that area, that could be very interesting indeed. It's in the very, very early stages, so you could be in a very nice place if you do have some FODMAP products, FODMAP-free. Okay, and grain-free. Now, I'm not a fan of grain-free. It's an American thing, and I don't think it's necessarily going anywhere, but that's not the same thing as saying that you can't sell product, okay? Grain-free says, actually, it's lined up with the paleo diet, and it says, and this is where I sort of disagree with it, really, not just wheat, but all grains are harmful, okay? So that's quite a tough claim, really, but it is getting some currency in some areas as well. So, people say that, the body's not adapted to them, it could be cheaper. Gluten-free is heavily processed, grain-free minimizes it. So there are some arguments for it, but actually grains give you lots of nutrients, lots of fiber, vitamins. Actually, life would be really boring if you couldn't have grains. And actually, it could be quite expensive to be grain-free, because you'd have to eat lots of meat and nuts, and those things are expensive. So, but again, grain-free is one of those trends that's just starting to happen. So again, if you've got a product that could be grain-free, might be interesting as well. Pricing wise, you've got to be careful, because here are some of the the issues. I don't think when you look at sort of pesto sauce, is it really credible that a gluten-free pesto sauce could be 150% more expensive than a non-gluten-free one? I think that's a tough differential. If you look something a bit closer, like mayonnaise, yeah, you can maybe get away with that, and ketchup as well. Usually it's a 10% markup between gluten-free versus conventional. That's normally what it is. but you have to sort of see that for what it is, and it obviously depends on what you can do. So 10% I would say would be the premium above standard products. The other area to look at, and you will get challenged on, is nutritional content. So I've just pulled these out here in terms of where they are. So here's a bagel, fat in a gluten-free bagel, 6.2 grams, fat in a regular bagel, 1.8. Kind of sugar works the other way, but 8.3% of sugar, 8.3 grams of sugar in gluten-free, under half of that in a regular version. So I think if your numbers look a bit like that, expect challenge and expect some pushback from the buyers. So that's what I wanted to say about the market as a whole. Now let's look at exporting to the UK and a few pointers there before we really open it up for questions. Okay, so you probably don't need any encouragement to do that, but let's understand why you want to export. It's important to attract new consumers and introduce demand. It also spreads risk because it means you're less vulnerable to your own domestic market and your market in South America as well. Increases your sales fairly obviously, and it makes you more competitive because you're going to get ideas, insights, and other ways of doing business. And certainly in today's world, no one country or no one company has got a monopoly on how to do things properly. It's obviously going to make more profit in terms of that as well. And obviously it's going to extend your product life cycle, because you might find some of your products at home, they're declining sales. Actually, when you look at exporting them, they might have another lease of life. Okay, economies of scale. So it can be a good way of giving you extra volume that might justify more machinery, more capital investment. And lastly, exporting a board gives you more credibility. People think you're just a better company if you've got an export business. It's just where it would go with, really. Okay, and there are kind of 64 million UK consumers that look at it, as we've just sort of said here. That's interesting. And 213 billion projected grocery spend by 2022. And there's 185 billion current spend, and the online spend is above 10 billion. So that's just people ordering food online through their computer. And the number of outlets of food companies is about 347. So that's supermarkets, cafes, restaurants, etc. And the top 4 supermarkets is 76%. So if you want to cover 3/4 of the UK, you need to get a listing with just 4 shops, really. And then the total number of new products, which is a staggering number, 16,000 each year. That's a huge amount of new food products every year. It really is. So hopefully that gives you an idea a little bit about the UK and what you're dealing with. More broadly, in terms of looking forward from there, let's look at the market as a whole. As I said, it's a concentrated market. 2 companies, as you can see there, almost gets you half the market. By the time you add in Asda and you add in Morrison's, you really do have 3/4 of the market. And these guys up here, they all have interesting shares, but obviously they're not as exciting to you as these big companies here. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind when you start to plan. But everybody is targeting selling to Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda, Morrison's. Everybody wants to go there, so it's red hot competition. Whereas if you attack up here, there's a bit more space and a bit more room. So it's up to you how you want to do that. And that's, when we work with companies, that's a lot of what we spend our time deciding what we call the route to market. What's the right way to start? Tesco is obviously the biggest, but the discounters, Lidl and Aldi, they've been growing really well. Online retail is growing very fast. So there's £10 billion just on online retail at the moment as well. So there's a lot going on in that sense. So when planning exporting, there's a few things we need to consider. The most important thing, if you only listen to one thing that I've said, you have to do your research before you come to the UK. You have to be, and there's a couple of things you have to be familiar with. There's the market as a whole, and we've touched on a few things, but the individual market for your product, okay? And we call that category, okay? It's important to understand your category within the multiples. And you have to know your own range, and therefore you need to know the category and the products that are in your range. So the competitors, and rather than, you know, and I don't want to pick out the Italians, but the Italians do this badly. The Italians tend to bring 100 products to a meeting and ask the buyer, which ones do you want? That's not how the British buyer works. The British buyer wants to understand which products you think would fit the British market. They want you to do the work, not them. So you need, you know, that research is all about you, not about the buyer in that sense, okay? And then I guess the last thing is there's labeling issues as well, but your channel choice, really, really, really important here. Where are you going to play? You know, we talked about it. Are you going to go straight to Tesco and Sainsbury's and these guys, or are you going to go to less competitive areas and get in? What sort of volumes do you want? You know, you've got the multiples, you've got wholesale, convenience, food service, health stores. You know, and a lot of what we do is look at this route to market. Probably of all the choices you've got, getting your range right and your route to market right, that will determine your success. You can't just get the email of the buyer and just kind of send them 100 emails. They just won't reply to you in that sense. They just won't reply. So it's important to bear that in mind. So that's an important part of it as well. And then if we look sort of more broadly than that, it's an area really that there's 4 ways of getting into the market. You have an agent. Generally, they introduce you or your product to a customer and charge you commission. They will then do the sales negotiation on your behalf, but the deal is between you and the retail customer, and you need to organize your own supply chain. That's an agent. A distributor, they will sell and market the products and manage the logistics, okay? You know, so you sell it to them at a given price, they manage the taxes, they manage the tariffs, and you either pay a retainer or a percentage, okay? And they keep all the financial risk. That's a distributor. The other option is for you to have a direct sell. So you get on the plane and you manage the sales process. So you have staff or you have a team and you deal with research, sales, documentation, taxes, logistics. That's the cheapest way of doing it in many instances. And if you're a large multinational, that's exactly what you would do. However, when you're smaller than that, you know, that's the most expensive thing to do in the short term, but probably the cheapest in the long term. And how we come in is we're in between that, really. We run a business that's flexible. You use us when and where you need, in that sense. Quite a lot of our work is we help you source a trusted partner. So we help you source these guys, okay? We help you find the right distributor, because if you pick the wrong distributor, you'll end up 2 years locked into a contract, or you'll pay them a lot of money, or they won't do a very good job. So that's a difficult one. We reduce the risk of you finding the wrong partner and find you the right partner. Also, we use these sort of boots on the ground. If you want to do a direct sell, we'll work with you and we'll support you with that. And also the main area that we often get used is get the range right, the price right, and the branding right for the UK market. Usually you don't need to make many alterations, but it's about optimizing the mix to get it right in that sense. Okay, so now is the practical bit. Many companies find this a bit boring, but it's really, really important to get this right. Avoid cultural and translation fails. So make sure that your product is translated out of Portuguese into English properly, okay? And it isn't just individual words that should be checked. It should be phrases as well, which may not culturally fit. And there's lots of funny videos. There's lots of funny archives on the internet of companies where they've come into the UK and got their words wrong. And it's amusing and it's funny. And the same goes for British firms and American firms trying to export the other way. But get the language right. Check your labels. UK labelling laws are still dictated by the European Union and are different to Brazil. So you need all the correct mandatory information. Otherwise, you face a recall. And this is the worst thing that can happen for you. And this is where you have to take the product off the shelf, and that is a very, very bad outcome for you at that point. All right, you really don't want that. And there you are looking sad, okay, at that point. So avoid recalls as much as you can, okay. And if you look sort of further beyond that, these are all the documentation that you need. Bit of lading, commercial invoice, packing list, packing declaration, conformance, analytics, phytosanitary, AO, SAD, VAT, and BRC. So a lot of things that you need to think of, okay, and a lot to talk about as well. So there's a variety of things there. Okay, so we've got that, but let's look about some of the other things that you need. And once you've ticked everything off that list, here's an example of some of the things that you need to support your selling in the UK, and that the buyers will ask you when you speak to them. So trade shows are a great way to introduce your brand to the market. Here's a stand that we've designed for a client very recently. You've also got a UK profile, so people do social media advertising and promotion. So the buyer will say, are you at a trade show? Are you on social media? Are you doing that in English or are you doing that in Portuguese? And then UK customers love MPD. They love new products. So what is it about? What are you doing in that area to really help it as well? That's an important area as well. So they will ask you what your plans are for that. And here's a case study. So we worked with this company, an Australian company called I Quit Sugar, headed up by Sarah Wilson. Okay, so Sarah Wilson is a big celebrity over there in Australia, and it wasn't her company, but she was the face of the product. And they're the second largest snacking company in Australia, over 100 products and 5 brands. So they were huge in Australia. Many were sugar-free and gluten-free. And their question really was, where should we play? How can we get into the UK? And they approached us about this time last year, actually. So we did a lot of research in the market to find out where their products were, and looked at the channels. They're in the snacking and baking area. So we looked at their range, and then our advice was to start with their brand, I Quit Sugar. They had various brands, but we said let's start there, and then follow with your other brands. Okay, we analysed the products to make sure they'd be profitable. Then we chose the channel, and we concluded IQS, which is I Quit Sugar, be supermarkets and health stores. That's where we started. And that took us 2 months to get the range right at that point. And then sort of going forward from there, we did research with our database. So we work with over 100 commercial partners, agents, distributors, importers to see which of those will be best for you. And they were outside of the European Union. They had no logistics, so we gave them a distributor so they could handle their sales tax, the value-added tax to be sorted. And eventually, they decided, actually, let's manufacture the product here in the UK so that the checks would be simpler. So we found them a contract packer. And the main issue they faced was the European labelling laws. The European Union, a lot stricter than Australia, and the brand was threatened by this. We found a way around it. And I'd say that's a big area for you to think about. The health claims that you make in Brazil or Canada are allowed to say about your product, you might not be able to say over here. And it's gone really, really well. They have 7 lines now in Sainsbury's, okay? And they regularly sell out due to their great brands and marketing support. So hopefully that gives you just a little idea of the process. But they didn't just arrive one day with the samples and get those listings. That took a long time to come through. So we started that, I'd say, sort of May 2017, and it took us about 9 months to get them to the listings in Sainsbury's. That's sort of the time frame that you're looking at for these types of market entries. And here's some products. So we created this for a company that wanted to come into the British market. And this gives you an idea of some of the trends in the UK as well. So we created this to be shocking, to be arresting. You can see the flavors here. You've got salt and vinegar. You've obviously got a chili flavor. We hung the chili on the horns there. We did a cheese flavor. And this has gone really well. We launched this product a couple of weeks ago, and that's gone really well at the moment. So that's something that we're really proud of. I'm really pleased. Lots of listings coming there. And here's some more trade marketing. So this was a Finnish company, and obviously in Finland they have the Northern Lights. So you can see the Aurora Borealis, and therefore this is the Northern Lights here. This is what you can see. So we're communicating space, purity, and it was a big stand going all the way from here all the way across there. And then we had the products and all the stands, etc. And this here is just an example of some of the flyers that the supermarkets expect you to produce that would advertise and talk about your products in the market. Here's another one. Here's a gluten-free product we created for the market on behalf of a client. So here we put all the allergen claims down here. It's actually free from 14 allergens, but we picked out the most important ones as these ones because that's what the consumers were concerned about. And then we managed to get the quinoa added to it. So it had a superfood, family claim. Here's a certification of its gluten-free status. If it's new, then we need to say it's new. And this packaging is sort of paper, and we put the macaroni, there's sort of penne shape on it there as well. Here's a macaroni, and then there's this cutaway, which is here, so you can see the product as well. So that's important as well. This is the website here that you can see. So there's quite a lot of it that you need to put through as well. Okay. And then if you look at this, this is another example, another case study really. This product's going into the supermarkets, again launched a couple of weeks ago. And this is a completely different end of the market, launched really at students as a snack product. And obviously we did this so it was a smile, to be a smiley brand. We're taking on craft here. Mac and cheese is a big American trend. Here's the health claim. We found out that we were able to put a source of protein on there. A kind of a claim about the instancy of it. It's ready in 5 minutes. Real cheese rather than powdered cheese. And then we redid the company logo to make it look like a piece of macaroni. And as you can see there, it looks like a macaroni. My hand's not very straight. This is the website, as you can see here. And this is the chili version here of the product. So hopefully that gives you another idea. it's loud, it's in your face, and it's going to get stand out on grocery shelves as well. So that was another successful sort of case study as well. So thank you for listening. If there's anything that we can help you as you start to explore the UK market, then please ask. You see, you've got Rosanna and myself, and obviously Rosanna at the embassy as well can help as well. So that's what I wanted to say, but I'm sure you've got plenty of questions. So feel free to text any questions down in the chat box, and we can take it from there. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Good question. The markup depends on a number of factors, and as you'd expect, the higher end retailers would tend to work off higher margins than the lower end retailers in that sense. And really, you know, for a discounter, you could be looking at margins in the region of, you know, under 20%, but for a a higher end retailer, you could be looking at 2, maybe 3 times that as well, which is a big, a really big markup. So, but some retailers are easier to deal with. I mean, so the lower margin expectation retailers, often it's one drop to a central warehouse in the middle of the UK, say Birmingham. Whereas, you know, some of the other retailers will want you to do 5 or 6 depots, which is a greater logistics cost. So I think what I call the cost to serve is a really important consideration and part of the question. Okay, so Roberto from Santa Helena, thanks for the question. I think doing your work on aflatoxin is really important, because the standards, particularly you look at mushrooms and other fungi, I think those sorts of areas are important to get to the bottom of. I'm not a technical expert in toxins per se, but I do understand that you need to get that clearance from the European Union, and I would do that as the first point of call, really, and be able to understand it from there. Do we have any other questions, folks? Hi, thank you, Renata. Yeah, I think athletes are an important group for free from. What you find is there's a big correlation between vegan, vegetarian, and free from. And within that, there's a higher than average, significantly higher than average interest in health. And one of the reasons is there's lots of sports people. And I would say very, very few professional athletes. I mean, that's a really small number. You're talking about, 1% of the population, if you like, is professionally paid for being an athlete of some description. But, a quarter of UK people participate seriously in sports. Now, the most popular sports are cycling, running, swimming, in terms of the statistics. For individual sports and for team sports, they're rugby, cricket, and football. But there's also big areas for martial arts, for some sort of bodybuilding and weightlifting. These are some of the big sports areas. Obviously, protein's important for those guys, so is energy, and so is recovery as well. So there's a lot of interest in those types of products. Yeah, thank you for those questions, Orlando. Yeah, that's perfect. So I think we've worked closely with team in the embassy and also the trade and investment teams and SECOM, Rosanna, Tatiana, etc. So we've worked closely with those guys, and obviously at the start of the webinar you had that positioning as well. We're very happy to share all this information. Very happy to help you further if that can be useful as well. And there's a question there from Pedro Costa. Is there any more on the question there? That would be great. If you could specify that a little more, I'd be happy to answer that as well. Okay, Regina, thank you for your question on sugar-free. Yes, I think this is a really hot topic. This month, the sugar tax came into the UK, therefore, and that was primarily for soft drinks. But that's going to be, I'm sure, extended over time to other baked goods, products, snacks, etc. So I think zero sugar is an area whereby if you have any products in that area, I think there's a real interest. Like I said, there's a slight reticence to go for artificial sweeteners, stevia, sucralose, etc. But of all those, probably stevia is the product that's most commercially acceptable in that sense. So yeah, zero sugar, really interesting. Depends what it is, of course, but a lot of interest there. Do we have any other questions, guys? Okay, so any last call for questions? If not, then we'll wrap it up. Brilliant. Okay, well, look, thank you very much for your attention. Please do follow up with any of the contact information as well, and I'll hand back to Mission Control in London at this point. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Hamish Renton and Rosiana Evans from HRA Drinks and Food Consultants for the insightful presentation. I think it was very useful. I particularly learned a lot of new things and a lot of insights about how to enter in the UK market that I will have the chance to share with with the Brazilian companies that come to us to the embassy. Also, I'd like to thank ApexBrasil and especially Alex Figueiredo, the head of the office in Brussels, and Madalena, who supported us a lot in this webinar, and also my colleagues Rosanna here from the embassy, and Tatiani and Iraklis. And of course, I'd like to thank all the participants for joining us in the seminar. We'll go over the questions asked and provide a summarized answer by email, and the presentation is recorded, as I said in the beginning. Please give us your feedback. You saw in the last slide of Hamish's presentation that the email of the trade section of the embassy. So please give us your feedback. This is our first webinar, and your feedback is very valuable to us. I hope you enjoyed and that this meeting was fruitful for your company. Thank you very much.